See you in the land of Mordor, death awaits you at the border. Pass on through the gates of fun, destroy the ring of power and war.
Alright, all you Middle-earth role-playing fans. Going back to the lands of Middle-earth. Today we're looking at Erech and the Past of the Dead adventure module. This book was made in 1985. This is a first edition book. I never got to play it simply because it was out of print by the time I started playing, and it was hard to find in my area. So I had to wait for years later to buy this on eBay, have it shipped to my mom's house, and then had it shipped to Korea actually, where I was able to read it and then put it away before shipping it back to Canada or bringing it back on a trip. Can't remember which. So I like the cover work. It's not Agnes McBride, but you see two guys looking at the stone at Erech, and the undead are crowded around it, and then one guy turns and he sees an undead behind him. So it's kind of interesting cover art. And on the back you have a listing of all the other modules. You can see you get the adventure campaign guide, comes with a world map. I have both. And then you have the campaign modules, which I have all of them, and then you have the adventure modules and the first edition rulebook, which was different than the one I have. I have like a second reprint rulebook. Gives an interior map of the Morthond Fiend and the Vale of Erech. I'm probably mispronouncing Erech. Is it Erech or Erech? I always think it's Erech. The CH is a hard CH. But it could be a soft Erech. I don't know. So you can go from Adoris, Dunharrow, all the way to the Sarn, Erech, and Morthondost, and the Morthond Thief, which is it's kind of an interesting map. You can use counters to move Aragorn through the Past of the Dead on his way. And we got the table of contents, guidelines to the maps, converting stats to Rollmaster system. Alright, so moving along, we go to the introduction, and it talks about the little brief summary of King Morthond, Gron the Doomed, lampooning the harvest hymn 5 days before his death in TA3, promising to come to their aid if they were attacked. And when the time came for that oath to be fulfilled, he declined because he feared Sauron more than he feared the Dunedain, and doomed his people. So they consider the Second Age the dark years of Sauron. The devout but primitive religion of the Daen Coentis made it relatively easy for the Dark Lord to subvert the worship of these people. With the passing of years, the evil one preyed upon their superstitions. So they were superstitious people. Sauron was able to manipulate them and inspire fear. So they feared Sauron more than they feared the Dunedain and the elves. Then the Dunedain come. The Númenóreans made colonies on the coast, and the faithful settled mostly in Pelargir and Lebanon, and made inroads into that area. So the Dunedain and the Daen Coentis, they coexisted for a while, and that's when Islidur made his famous trip over there to see if he can get their alliance, because they were a numerous people living in the White Mountain Vales, and helped them fight the war against Sauron. Ice's got King Mero Glassinen swore an oath of friendship with Elendil and his heirs, declaring the Daen Coentis and their great fortress Dunharrow, or Dunharrow, whatever be a disposal of Gondor. Yet already there was mutterings of discontent among the Daen Coentis. So already there's problems with the Dunedain taking over lands and forcing the Dunlenders or Daen Coentis into the Highlands. But what can you do? So then it talks about the oath breaking and how that affected them. They did not go to war, the Daen Coentis, on either side. They stayed neutral and basically hid themselves in the valleys of the White Mountains. And they were cursed by Islidur. So it talks about how it affected them. Princes who died were seen walking the road of the Morthond Vale, riding ghostly horses through the forest. The iron mines became inexplicably unproductive. Great craftsmen died and their apprentices could not recall master skills. More and more women became barren. The gentle worship of the old days died out almost entirely, being replaced by the worship of fearsome demonic beings thirsting for blood sacrifices. And they became obsessed with death. That's probably what happened. They faded. They didn't just die out all at once. they basically faded. Wells dried up. The land became unfertile. Oaths were taken very seriously in Tolkien's world. Many Daen Coentis moved out of the White Mountain area and into what's now Dunland, those that could escape. So then we get an expansion of Lamadan in the 6th century into Trambar. And the Morthond Vale is granted as a crown fief. Talks about how the Great Plague affected things, which is where we are now. So then we go into the land around Erech. You got the White Mountain Caverns, the foothills and vales of Morthond, climate, flora, all that sort of fun stuff. Enchanted herbs, which I never really used, but it does mention how in the Houses of Healing, that's where they get a lot of their herbs from Lossonark and the Vales of the White Mountains. So it makes sense. Talk about that. If you ever get injured up there, you can find something. Poisons. You have the fauna, which isn't really a big deal. It talks about great eagles, but I can't say there were any great eagles living in the White Mountains. Tolkien makes no mention of it. Some king spiders, which are kind of like the spiders of Mirkwood. Not quite as big. Then we go into the inhabitants, local folk, Daen Coentis, the people of skill. And it talks about how they were, their lifestyle. So it makes really interesting reading. And then we have the Daen Atlantis, who are the successors of the Daen Coentis, the Dunlandings. They're not as skilled as as their ancestors, mainly because of the oath breaking. But they are there in Gondor. They make up a small but significant portion of the population. But the Dunedain are the most predominant folk of Morthond, though they are relative newcomers. So foreign folk, it mentions Northmen, Easterlings, and Elves, as well as Dwarves. But there wouldn't have been any great numbers of any of them. The Elves would have just been passing through for the most part. Dark races, it mentions hill trolls and cave trolls. Trolls were probably exterminated long before, so I wouldn't expect to find trolls within those mountains. Orcs tried to make bases in the White Mountains in the late Third Age, after the war between the dwarves and orcs. But they were all eradicated well before the War of the Ring. Undead races. Ghouls, skeletons, and wraiths. Tolkien never has ghouls in his works. That's a completely taking creative liberties and a D&D inspired approach. Skeletons are very... You'll see skeletons, but they don't do anything. They're not scary. They're just lying there. They don't move. Race, yes, they have race. They're the most common form of ghost that in the Tolkien world. You have the Barrow-wights, the Ring Race, the Oathbreakers. They're basically race or greater ghosts. Corpse candles and all that other fun stuff. So it talks about how they work, as well as ghosts. And there is a ghost mentioned in the first age of Lord of the Rings, Gorlim the Unhappy, who betrayed Barahir and his outlaws, being one of the best well known from the first age. So the Oathbreakers are race, basically. Then next, politics. Morthond. Quiet, insignificant fief, tucked away, well away from the world. It is. It's a middle of nowhere. It's just a haunted vale because of the Oathbreakers in Dunharrow. So next up, it gives sites of interest. The Sarn Erech, which is the largest town. And it's the holiest of the Daen Coen sites and high symbol of Dunlanding worship. And then we get Morthondos, which is the principal fortress of the area. And it is where the home of the princes of Morthond reside. The Hill of Erech, which is where the Black Stone is. The Black Stone came from Numenor and was set on the hill, and that's where the Oathbreakers took their vow with Islidur. So it's definitely of great value, great religious value, and not something you want to play with. Then there's Minas Angerin, which is another fortress. The town of Osarnen, which is 7 stones. There's a town there, but there's also a complex tucked away in the mountains. And then finally you get the Pass of the Dead. But here you get a skeleton. That's the son of Brago the Builder. The second king of Rohan. His son went and did the Pass of the Dead. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Might have been Brago. Who knows? But he died trying to get through the Pass of the Dead. So that's a skeleton you would see. Alright, next up we got selecting an adventure. Choosing a time period, suggestions on running adventures. Encounter, so you get a random encounter table and other stuff. So this gives you guidelines for it. And then Adventures in the Vale of Erech, journeying into the Vale. So it's a tale about the Great Plague. I never actually played any of these, so it's kind of hard to say how good they are. But it does give a lot of backstory about the town of Saran Erech, and taverns and inns, shops. So it gives a layout. There you go, the layout of Saran Erech. Professional establishments, other notable structures, buildings for sale, the townhouse. So a pretty cool map. The inn, which is where everyone goes. Loves to go for a pint. Prominent townsfolk. So a lot of NPC players. Other interesting townfolk. Dwarven armor. So they always have dwarven armors. Dwarves don't really... You never hear about dwarves being in Gondor. I think Thorin Oakenshield, in exile, he spent some time in Dunland, mining coal and smithing, but later went to the Blue Mountains. Dwarves tend to congregate with their other dwarves. You never hear them being in the White Mountains until after the War of the Ring, and Gimli brings dwarves down to Eglaran, the Glittering Caves. And you get prominent fortress folk, so the Eredor, the Prince of Morthond, his heir, Princess Arwenwen, and whatnot. Then it gives a layout of the fortress itself, which is nice. Exterior plan, interior plans, the gatehouse, and all that. So really cool designs. How you can defend it and attack it. Mentions all the towers, the old Bailey stables, the great house. It's not a huge fortress, but it's well defended. The lower Morthond, so the cellars and basements, dungeons, so to speak. Secret doors, great vaults. Your typical stuff that you get. You get prices of trade. So prices might be a little different in the Vale than somewhere else. Next up, you get a rescue of Aranwi, so you have to rescue the princess. She might have got kidnapped. I always hated those kidnapping ones. I never played those. Waste of time. Adventures in the Pass of the Dead, the Tale of Tombs. This was something that would have been really fun to try, to see if you can get how far you can go in the Pass of the Dead. It probably won't end well, but you never know. Reaching the tombs, the tomb guardians, so pukal creatures, so pukal stones. You see them on Dunharrow on the other side, and the Rohan side. They would be there also on the Gondorian side. And they were all ancient guardians. And it talks about the guardians. This is, again, Tolkien never mentioned these, so these are ice creations. And it gives different, the pillars represent different guardians and can become different stuff. Now there is some magic in pukal statues, but it faded in time. So by the time of the War of the Ring, they were just stone carvings. The pukal men had long gone. Only the Woses really remain. Those in the Forest of Anorion, between Anorion and Rohan, remain, and probably those, some in Eriador as well. So you got the layout of the pass, Dunharrow, which is the first area, then area 2 north, area 3. You got some tombs in there. Area 3 has got Chamber of the Moon, and it gives a layout. It's kind of like the old Moria book where it gives layouts like that. Area 5, 6, 7. Area 8's got Chamber of Blood. Area 9, Tomb of the Heirs. Chamber 10, Tomb of Tears. So it talks about all these tombs in the south gate, where it flows in Morthond. The Peter Jackson movie makes it seem like it's bigger and much more complex than it really is. The layouts for the Path of the Dead they're kind of nice, but they're not really intricate. The Peter Jackson movie definitely makes it more exciting looking with a City of the Dead. Then we got a Master Beast chart, Master NPC charts, which are always nice to have. A lot of those. Then a Master Military chart, so it's not exactly a huge garrison. There's only like 20 guys guarding the fortress of Morthond, and there's like a 10-man patrol. The people of Erech, and then they got mountain orcs, which wouldn't be a lot. And you got a master encounter table. Orcs would be afraid of the dead, so the orcs wouldn't be hanging around either. So master encounter tables wherever you are. Finally, a product listing, and last, a map at the back, which I thought was really nice. It connects fairly decently with the Sea Lords of Gondor map, which never really included this part. So I like the map. Yeah, there was always this gap here in this area between the Sea Lords of Gondor map and the Rohan map. I hated the fact they left gaps in these. But overall, it seems like an okay book. The only thing I would really do would be the Pass of the Dead scenarios. I wouldn't care about anything else. From a military standpoint, no, there's nothing really there. So it's not, I wouldn't consider this my favorite book. It could have been more. It should have been more about the Pass of the Dead and less about Morthond, the Vale of Morthond. And they could have did more Second Age stuff. Or even Third Age. With the Third Age, with the Oathbreakers gone, the Pass of the Dead are wide open to find out what's inside. That would have been much better to look into. Who knows what you can find. And Rohan could go in and retrieve the son of Brago the Builder, who foolishly perished in the Pass of the Dead. So you have things like that. So like I said, I never got to play this because it was never out when I was playing. I had to buy it off eBay and get it shipped to Korea and all that before I could read it. So no time to play it. But I enjoyed reading these books, even when I didn't play them. The wealth of information and the depth they could bring. But anyway, any Mert fans out there, let me know if you guys had this book and you played it. How did it go? I'd love to know. Leave comments in the comments section. Hit the like button. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Until next time, this has been Roman Daesel. I'm out of here.